Good evening. You're watching the main news on HKIBC. I'm Sarah Wong. Our top stories tonight. Social distancing measures have been extended until after the Lunar New Year. The catering trade stands to be a big beneficiary of the government's latest tranche of emergency funds. And Australia cites health in good order as it cancels Novak Djokovic's visa a second time. The government has extended social distancing measures for 2 more weeks, which means they will cover the Lunar New Year holiday. It has also decided to scrap flower markets across the city to contain the latest COVID outbreak. Wong has the latest.
It'll be another Lunar New Year under a strict lockdown, now that the government has decided to extend social distancing measures for 2 more weeks. This means the tough rules, including a restaurant dine-in cap at 6 p.m., will go on throughout January 31st and February 1st, New Year's Eve and New Year's Day on the lunar calendar. Gyms, beauty parlors, and bars will remain closed. The ban on flights from 8 countries, including Australia, Britain, and the United States, will also continue. Chief Executive Carrie Lam said this evening that the measures are necessary because the 5th wave is still not under control. But in an assurance to affected businesses, the city's leader said unless another major outbreak occurs, these restrictions will be eased after February 3rd. But she adjusted expectations by making it clear it was not a sure thing.
I'm afraid nobody could give any guarantee. In a public health crisis like this, no one could guarantee whether we will have another dangerous variant after Omicron. So the health authorities and every government are trying their very, very best to fight the pandemic in order to protect their people.
Flower markets across the city, a staple for the Lunar New Year, have also been cancelled. Wong, HKIBC.
The government is dishing out $3.7 billion to businesses hard hit by the 5th COVID wave. A big chunk is expected to go to restaurants, but individuals such as bus drivers and flower growers are not forgotten. Young explains.
After more than 1 year, the Anti-epidemic Fund is back. Chief Executive Carrie Lam announced a 5th tranche of the financial relief to the tune of $3.75 billion. Businesses which were affected by the latest tightening of the social distancing measures will be compensated, although the amount will be half of what they received in the previous round. For example, about 17,000 licensed restaurants will get a one-off grant of $50,000 to $250,000, depending on their size. Subsidies will also be dished out to fitness centers, beauty and massage parlors, as well as service providers of the education sector. Individual applicants, meanwhile, will receive 2/3 of the compensation compared to the 4th round. These include school bus drivers, fitness coaches, and arts practitioners. Separately, slumping industries which have never recovered since the start of the COVID pandemic, such as travel agencies, will be looked after. There will also be compensation for flower growers who are hit by the cancellation of Lunar New Year fairs. Applications open as early as next week, and the money could be distributed in the middle of next month. Yang, HKIBC.
The subsidies were welcomed by trade bodies, but some business leaders questioned if they are enough to tide struggling businesses over.
When we are talking about there are so many industries being affected by this restriction, $4 billion funding is far too little to help the industry, especially when we are noting that the restriction will be extended for another 2 weeks. That means we cannot do any business before Chinese New Year and also until February the 3rd.
There is growing concern about staff at the Penny's Bay Quarantine Center after a second security guard tested preliminary positive for COVID. A nurse is confirmed to have contracted the virus, while the authorities are investigating the root infection of a food delivery worker. Isaac Lee has the details.
Health officials are trying to trace people, mostly in Yuen Long, who had their food delivered by a food panda worker. The 29-year-old man, who lives in Tin Yat Estates in Tin Shui Wai, is also a construction worker. He was classified as preliminary positive yesterday. As the man has a low viral load, authorities are checking to see if he is a repositive patient. One of the two nurses who tested preliminary positive yesterday is now confirmed to have COVID, but her colleague at the Tuen Mun Clinic will be discharged from hospital after experts found that her test sample had been contaminated by vaccines. In all, Hong Kong logged 9 cases today, with 1 a local case and 2 others import-related. Meanwhile, there is concern about staff at the Penny's Bay Quarantine Center. Another security guard was listed as preliminary positive, 2 days after her colleague was diagnosed with the virus. The new patient lives in Bohemia Garden in Chuan Kwan O and has been to a restaurant and wet market near her home. Before her test, she had lunch with her infected colleague.
When she took off the face shield, if she did not take it off carefully and wash her hands carefully, she may somehow contaminate her eyes or face or nose and got infected. This is a known route of transmission, but we could never confirm.
A search is continuing for 33 diners at the Causeway Bay Eatery after 3 other customers tested positive. Isaac Lee, HKIBC.
Strict measures are in force in Zhuhai after 1 person tested positive for COVID. This came as 52,000 residents in the city bordering Macau underwent screening. People in high-risk areas were ordered to stay home for at least 2 weeks, following a positive case in neighboring Zhongshan yesterday. The mainland logged 143 local infections yesterday, 98 of them in Henan province. 69 were in Anyang City, which is running short of surgical masks and protective gear. Tianjin's Omicron outbreak, meanwhile, expanded as 34 new cases took the tally above 120, triggering a 3rd round of mass tests. Customs officers have seized 35 tons of meat, which they say was being smuggled to the mainland. They expressed concern about the quality of the meat, as there was no refrigerator in the vessel that carried it. Chloe Feng reports.
This morning, customs officers displayed the meat they seized in an anti-smuggling operation off southwest Lantau yesterday. The 35 tons of meat, including pig ears and tripe, were worth $5.2 million. It's believed that the consignment was destined for the mainland ahead of the Lunar New Year. Officers said they spotted a cargo ship with no light on being approached by a speedboat off Fanlao. They moved in as goods were about to be transferred from the ship to the speedboat, which fled toward the mainland on seeing the officers. 5 people on board the ship were arrested and released on bail while investigations continue. Senior investigator Wong said he was worried about the quality of the meat as there were no freezers on the ship. He also noted that smuggling syndicates are trying to improve their chances of success by operating in the small hours of the morning, when they think there are fewer enforcement personnel on duty. They also use faster vessels to avoid arrest. Chloe Feng, HKIBC.
In other news, another Kwai Tsing district councillor has lost his seat after being sent to jail. Leung Kem Wai was sentenced to 9 months in prison in December for inciting and joining the 2020 June 4th vigil, which was banned by police on health grounds. He was also a member of the Hong Kong Alliance, which organized the annual event. There are now 24 vacancies in the Kwai Tsing District Council. Most of its members were disqualified after their oaths were declared invalid in October last year. Overseas, Australian authorities have again revoked Novak Djokovic's visa, this time on health and good order grounds. A court battle is expected over the weekend as the tennis world #1 tries to salvage his chances of defending his Grand Slam title in Melbourne. Raymond Young has more.
Australian Immigration Minister Alex Hawke dropped a bombshell this afternoon, breaking days of silence. Today, I exercised my power under the Migration Act to cancel the visa held by Mr. Novak Djokovic on health and good order grounds, on the basis that it was in the public interest to do so, Hawke announced in a statement. In making this decision, I carefully considered information provided to me by the Department of Home Affairs, the Australian Border Force, and Mr. Djokovic. Shortly after the announcement was made, local newspaper The Age reported that the tennis star has been asked to attend an interview with immigration officials tomorrow. His legal team is expected to file a second appeal against the decision, having successfully overturned a deportation order last week. As both sides gear up for a court battle, time is running out for Djokovic as the first match of the Australian Open gets underway on Monday. The latest development also threw the Australian Open schedule into chaos after the draw was held yesterday with Djokovic as the top seed. Raymond Yang, HKIBC.
And coming up after the break. A new spat between Britain and China over claims that Beijing is trying to manipulate British lawmakers. And China records a massive trade surplus for last year.